Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video we'll be looking at loops in C. Now, what is a loop? A loop is a statement that allows us to execute a statement or group of statements multiple times. Now, we have types of loops, which are the for loop, the while loop, the do while loop, and the nested loop. Now, the for loop allows us to execute a sequence of statements multiple times and abbreviates the code that manages the loop variables. The while loop repeats a statement or group of statements while a given condition is true. It tests the condition before executing the loop body. The do while loop, in the other hand, is more like a while loop, but except that it tests the condition at the end of the loop body. Now, the nested loop, what it does is that you can actually use one or more loops inside another loops. So it's called nested loops. Now, if you listen or paid attention to all these definitions, you will hear something like repetition of statements. Okay, is used to repeat a statement or something, a group of code multiple times. So all these are called loops. Now let's dive into our code and see how they are being implemented in C. As we have seen earlier in the definition of these loops, aim of the loop is it helps us to repeat a particular statement. So it must have a starting point and it must have an ending point. If it does not have an ending point, that means the loop is going to be infinite loop. It's going to continue looping. So we don't want our code right now for this class to be an infinite loop. Okay, so our loop will start from somewhere and end somewhere. So for us to initialize that, we give it an int of x. You can call it anything. So I'm starting from 0, or let's use this convention. Okay, I will say int x now, and also int y, or okay, let me leave int y alone. Now we are going to be working with for loop first. Okay, after for loop we can go to while loop. After while loop we can now go to do while loop, and after the do while loop we can now end with our nested loop. So our for loop says that we write for, then we now initialize the starting point. This is called initialization. You are now initializing the for loop, telling it where to start. Okay, now this is called the first parameter of the for loop. Now the second parameter says that you give it a condition. So while for x is equals to 0, now x is less than 10. Okay, this is the condition, which is the second parameter. Now if x is less than 10, what you are going to do is you have to increment x by 1. So each time this code runs, x will be incremented by 1 until x is not less than 10. So this our loop here is going to run as long as it is true. Okay, as long as x is less than 10, okay, it's going to run. But immediately x hits 10, or immediately x is not less than 10, this loop will terminate. So you can actually say x plus 2. Okay, increment it by 2, increment it by 3, whatever your aim of using the for loop, that one is dependent on you. Okay, but for right now we are incrementing it by 1. Okay, so when we now say x plus plus, this is called a post increment, a unary operator. If you go to my previous videos in which I explained operators in C, you will see I use this. Okay, what it does is that it adds 1 to x. Okay, it adds 1 to x. Okay, this is a post increment. So now we have done that. The next thing we are going to do is that we are going to print this. We are going to print x. So for us to print x, we are going to put it inside the printf function. Then we are going to format it. So we are printing an integer, so let's use I, and we are printing x. So what this does is that it will enter a loop and initialize our x to be 0. Now it now asks, is x less than 10? If it is so, if it is yes, x is less than 10, it will say okay. Then if x is less than 10, it will first of all print the x out for us. That means it's going to print the 0 out for us in the initial run. Then it now go back and say okay, if x is equals to 0, if x which is 0 is less than 10, then it should now print, you should now increment that x that is 0. You should now increment it by 1. So our x becomes 1. So if our x becomes 1, it will now print 1. This print else we run 2 times now is going to print 1. The first time was 0. The second time is 1. Now it will not take this value of x back to this for loop. Now this for loop will skip this condition. Okay, when it ran the first run, it used this initialization, but when it goes to the second loop, it skips this initialization here. But it started from here. Okay, now 1 is less than 10. Yes, 1 is less than 10. Okay, it's going to print x, then increment it by 1 again, meaning it's going to increment it by, that is, x is going to be 2 right now. It will now carry this x, come to this guy again. You now say okay, 3 is still less than what is it called, is it less than 10? So it will increment x, okay, and print it. It will go like this. It will be repeating itself until it gets to 9. If x is 9, okay, it's going to stop. Okay, why? Because x is not equal to, is not less than is not less than 10. Now why it is 9 is because you started from 0. Okay, assuming you started from 1, x is going to be 10. Okay, but you started from 0, so x is going to be 9. Okay, I'm not mistaken about that. So when this gets to 9, which the total number is going to be 10, but for us starting from 0 is going to be 9. So when it gets to 9, but this is 10, okay, so 10 is not less than 10. So 10 is equal to 10. 10 is not less than 10. Okay, so it will trip off. It will not increment anything again. It will not print anything again. It will just print 0 to 9. That is what is going to print for us. Let us run this and see what actually is printing out. Okay, let's break it. Let's put a new line. So you can see it's printing 0, printing 1, printing 2, printing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. You can see it got to 9 and stopped. So this is how we loop in with for loop. Now you'll be asking yourself, what particular code right now are we trying to repeat over and over again? This is the code that we are trying to repeat over and over again. You may have a function down here. Let's write a function. Let it return void. Did I even know how to spell function again? Okay, function print. Okay, print x. So it's not going to have anything, but it will just have this implementation here at the body. So here is going to be void. So we just come here, what am I even doing? Public function, come here, put the prototype here, and then put this guy here. So let's run this. Why is it giving us this error? Print f. Okay, this x is not is not here, so we have to put an integer here. We have to pass it. Okay, we have to pass this inside. So this is going to be like this. Okay, when I get to function, I will actually explain what scope is all about. Right now, this x was limited. This x is not being seen inside of this function. Okay, but you have to use this parameter, okay, or argument to pass this x that we are looping here into your function. So x is visible right now. So let us run this code. So you can see printing 0 to printing 9. Okay, so we now use this for loop to run this function 10 times. So if you have a function that you want to run about 10 times, 5 times, 20 times, this is how to do that. Okay, this is the work of a function, a for loop. Okay, so if we were to reduce the count, now this is the what will I call it, the stoppage limits, or the limits of the loop. So it's not going to exceed this 5. As I said before, you must have a starter, which is this, or starting point. Then you must have an ending point, which is this. Okay, so with this you can track your loop. Okay, your loop will not exceed, or your loop will not be an infinite loop. Okay, so let's run this. It's going to run from 0 to 4 right now. So printing 0, printing 4. Okay, so this is just a brief explanation of for loop. So you start with 4, then you initialize your variable, your starting point. You can even say 1 here, there's no problem. Okay, depending on what you're actually trying to achieve. Then you are now saying that this 0 here, which is this x here, or this x here, which is this 0 here, is less than 5, which is true. Remember, if you want this loop, this for loop to run, then that means this condition here must be true. This condition here must be true. But when it hits false, when this x is no more less than 5, is going to return false. That means the loop is going to break. Okay, so this is the condition. If this condition is true, then x will be incremented by 1. Then before it will be incremented by 1, it's going to print the original value that it has. Then that is why if you run this code, it will print 0 first, okay, before adding 1. Okay, so that is how you use your for loop, okay, in C. Now coming to the while loop, I'm going to comment this out. Now the while loop says that while, let me give it a space here. Now while x is less than 5, you can see it's still the same condition in the for loop, but the while is structure is like this. It only has one argument, okay, which is this expression here. So while this x is less than 5, it should do this. Let's carry this up here. Okay, it should print this, then it should say x plus plus. It should increment x 1 plus 1. So but for us to use this x, we need to initialize it. Remember, when using the for loop, okay, we did not initialize it here. Okay, we just declared it, okay, and initialize it here. But when we are dealing with while loop and do while loop, we need to initialize our x here. Or if you do not even want to use a variable, you can remove this x, put 0 here. It's still the same thing, okay? But me, I like using variable. There's no big deal about it though. Now, if you put 0 here, that means this guy is no more functioning. You are not going to be making use of this, okay? You will just put your print statement here, okay? But we are making use of the x, so we are actually passing the value of x to our print x function. Then inside the print x function, we're implementing it by printing this out on the screen for us. Now what this says is that while the x, which is 0, is less than 5, yes, 0 is less than 5, so this returns true. Okay, so while this is true, this loop is going to loop 5 times, okay, including the 0 is going to loop 5 times. Now each loop, it will increment by 1. So the first loop, it will print 0, increment by 1. That means x is now 1. X will come here and say, okay, is 1 less than 5? Yes, 1 is less than 5. It will print 1. It will now increment by 1 again, which is 2. It will go back and say, okay, 2, is it less than 5? Yes, it is still less than 5. You will now print 2, increment by 1. Is 3 less than 5? Yes, 3 is less than 5. It will come here, print 3, increment by 1, which is 4. It will now ask, okay, is 4 less than 5? Yes, 4 is less than 5. It will print 4 here, add 1. Now it will now say, okay, is 5 less than 5? No, 5 is not less than 5. It will stop. You can see how the while loop goes, okay? So let's run this. So you can see it's printed 0, printing 1, printing 2, printing 3, and printing 4, and it stops. It doesn't go to 5 or whatever. But let's change this 0 to 1. So let's start from 1. We are not starting from 0 again. So you can see it started from 1, 2, 3, 4. Now when you start from 1, definitely you must put something like, if you want to count from 5, okay, if you want to count from 5, that means you have to increase your 5 to 6. Okay, so if you run this, you see you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so just run your own code, manipulate it, and I believe you get the gist. Now let's go back to 0. Now let me run this. You can see it counted 1, 0, I mean to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you include this 0 now, it will be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 in total, which is this 6. Okay, but if you increment it by 1 and print, it will be 5 in total. So that is how the loop works. So this one is for the while loop. So it tests the condition first before doing anything on the body. Okay, the condition first, then the body. The same as the for loop. Okay, it tests the body, then it tests the condition first, then the body. Now let us go to the do while loop. Now the do while loop says the same thing but otherwise. So the do while loop goes like this: do, what is going to do is going to be here, then while the condition, what condition, x is less than 5, then you terminate it. So let's start x with 0. Okay, so x 0 is less than 5. So while do something, what is it going to do? It's going to do this. You can see that all of these our loops are doing the same thing. Is looping this our one function. Okay, is looping it so many times as we want. Okay, so it's going to it's going to do this. It's going to print this. So it's going to print 0 first because we initialize 0 here. It's going to print 0 here, then test whether increment that 0 by 1, then test the condition. If it is less than this, it will do this. Okay, it will also test this condition. If the condition is true, it will continue doing this until this condition is false. It will stop doing it. So let's run this. It's going to give us same output as this while and this for. So you can see printing 0, printing 1, printing 2, printing 3, printing 4. So this is how to use the do while loop in C or in any other programming languages that you might come across. So if there is any more explanation that you need me to give, just drop it in the comment box. Now coming to the nested loop. Now let's use for the nested loop. Let's use for loop for the nested loop. Wow. So we said here that for this, okay, let me remove this because we are now using for loop. Okay, for x is this and x is less than this and x plus plus. Now let's go and initialize another for loop inside of another for loop. So this one I'm going to call this j. Okay, so j is equal to 0 and j is less than x. Then if that is so, then j plus plus. Whoa, where am I writing this? Okay, it's not inside my printf. Sorry, I made a mistake. So it has to be inside this 4. So this x supposed to be here. Likewise. So now I put the implementation of this for loop here. I may say this j. Okay, so this will loop 5 times. So that means this our for loop inside of this for loop is going to loop 5 times. Now inside of this for loop we have a function that is going to print the number of j. Okay, now remember that we are incrementing this x. So if our j here is 0, that means 0 is less than 1. Or okay, I think we should initialize this to be 1, because when this is looping, this is also looping. So if our x is 1, that means when j is 0 here, our x here is going to be 1. That means 0 is still less than x, so it's going to be true. So this is going to loop. Okay, so as our 1 is as x is incrementing, our j will be incrementing, but our x will be incrementing on higher, like a step higher than j. Okay, so if our our x is 1, our j is going to be 0. If our x is 2, our j is going to be 1. So that is how it's going to do. Let's print this and see how what is going to be printed out. So we can see here printing 0, printing 1, printing 0, printing 1, printing 2, printing 0, printing 1, printing 2, printing 3, just like that. Okay, so you can see that our nested for loop printed, I think, 14 times. Okay, so this is how to nest a for loop or a loop. So you can actually have a for loop inside another for loop inside another for loop. Okay, so it's anyhow you want your code to run. Okay, you just give it the instruction, okay, and it will run the way you want it. Okay, so this is just a brief simple explanation of loops in C. Okay, the loop control statements, which are the for loop, the while loop, the do while loop, and the nested loops. So if you have any other questions, you can hit me up at the comment box, okay, and I'll be happy to reply. Thank you for watching. Do subscribe, like, and share.